So we come to chapters 17 through 19. In these three chapters, there is a lot going on, and we'll see how much I can cover in a minute or three, maybe four. But after Abraham and Sarai have made a mess of things with Hagar, God comes to Abram, assures him again of his promise, and then changes their names to Abraham and Sarah and initiates the rite of circumcision. So there's something of a shift in identity and a shift that there's an outward sign that these are a people centered in God's covenant. And then in the next two chapters, we get two stories that emphasize the importance of hospitality, or to put it in New Testament terms, the importance of how we love our neighbor. In the first story, three men who we later find out to be the Lord and or God and a pair of angels, these three men visit Abraham and Sarah and are welcomed with extravagant hospitality. As Sarah and Abraham, they make bread, slaughter a calf, serve curds and milk. They give them everything they can. The strangers then tell Abraham that in due season, Sarah would have a child. And Sarah, of course, famously laughs because she's well beyond the age of having a child. And just as a side note, Sarah gets a bad rap for this laugh, but in the chapter before this, Abraham actually falls on his face laughing when God tells him the same thing. But this story demonstrates amazing hospitality and the blessing that is conferred in the midst of that. And then we move to the second story, the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah. Now in this story, two of the angels that were with Abraham go to Sodom, where Abraham's nephew Lot convinces them to stay in his home. During the night, of course, the men of the city demand that Lot gives up his visitors so that they can abuse them. Lot instead offers his daughters, which is also very troubling. But eventually the angels convince Lot and his family to flee the town so that it can be destroyed. Now, if we take this story in its context in juxtaposition to the one before it, we see that these are two stories about hospitality, about how we treat the stranger in our midst. Abraham and Sarah show tremendous hospitality and are blessed in the midst of it. And the residents of Sodom show the complete opposite of hospitality and are cursed in the midst of it. Genesis tells us that the angels went to Sodom because of the outcry against Sodom. And interestingly, the Hebrew word for outcry is the word za'ak, and it's a word that indicates and is used elsewhere in Scripture to indicate the anguished cry of the oppressed or a plea for help in the face of injustice. And the prophet Ezekiel states Sodom's sin, saying, "His was the guilt of your sister Sodom. She and her daughters had pride, excess of food, and prosperous ease, but did not aid the poor and the needy." So in these stories, we see a vivid and kind of vicious reminder to love our neighbor, to care for the strangers in our midst. And we see the consequences of failing to show hospitality, the destruction that can come from that. So may we seek to welcome God into our midst as Abraham and Sarah did. And may we share the grace that we receive with all those that we encounter.